Hey everyone. The occasion for today's blog is the embarrassing mishap suffered by law professor Liesl McElroy of Drexel University. Professor McElroy, tenured, well-regarded, self-professed Supreme Court junkie, an occasional contributor to the highly regarded SCOTUS blog, was in the process of sending out an email to her students featuring an article on how to write better legal briefs. And in the process of sending out that email, she inadvertently pasted in not the link to the article, but a link to a porn video. So when the students opened their email, they saw not an article about how to write better legal briefs, but a porn video called "She Loves Her Anal Beads," which featured a woman pleasuring herself on a bed. Now, it should have been obvious to everybody that the professor had made a mistake, and after chuckling a bit, the students should have just reported it to the professor, who would have offered a red-faced apology and sent them the correct link. But life is not that simple. In this case, the email went viral. Many people saw it. Some people expressed outrage and indignation about it, felt that Professor McElroy should be disciplined. And the next thing we know, Drexel University is initiating an investigation into the professor for possible sexual harassment. Now, numerous commentators before me, David Ladd of the AboveTheLaw.com blog, Jason Lincolns of HuffPost, have pointed out the absurdity of this. All that was really needed here by way of an investigation was a quick call from the dean to the professor, where the dean would have said, "Professor McElroy, what the hell happened?" And she would have responded, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I pasted the wrong link in. What can I say? That's what happened." And the dean should have come back with, "Send an apology to your students, send them the correct link, and let's move on. End of story." But nothing so commonsensical and sane as that happened. Instead, the university came back with a defensive response, and I quote, "According to federal law and the university's policies and procedures, Drexel is required to initiate fact-finding for all reports of inappropriate behaviors of a sexual nature that may impact members of our community," end quote. So they not only went ahead with a full-blown investigation of this, they put the professor on administrative leave for a while, and somebody else took over her classes for accidentally sending this link. Ultimately, the professor was reinstated, but far more drama and energy was expended on this than was ever required. So let me give you my 3 takeaways from this episode. First of all, as I seem to say on a weekly basis now, the internet has become a repository for hysteria and excess. If I really stretch, I can think of a scenario in which perhaps an investigation might be required. Let's say, for example, that Professor McElroy was teaching a First Amendment law class, and she was going over some of the landmark First Amendment obscenity cases, D.H. Lawrence, Henry Miller, James Joyce. And in the process of reviewing some of those landmark cases, she said to her students, "Now I'd like you to take a look at an example of contemporary erotica and see whether it falls within the guidelines of permissible speech by the Supreme Court. Watch this video and write an essay." Now I can see where some students might take offense. Somebody would go to the dean telling him that they felt degraded. This was degrading to women. The professor shouldn't have used this particular assignment, yada, yada, yada. Okay. But nothing so complicated as that happened here. This was a case of a teacher accidentally sending a link which she never wanted the students to see in the first place. Alternatively, let's consider a different scenario in which the professor sends the wrong link, but in this case, it's a police stop in which a civilian is beaten to death by the police, or perhaps one of those gruesome ISIS killing videos. Those would be far more disturbing than what she sent. However, I don't think there'd be any kerfuffle of this nature if she had sent those videos. The students would have informed her of her mistake, she would have sent the correct link, and the issue would have died overnight. What in fact kept this story going was that it was sexy. It was sexy enough that it had long legs, so to speak. It was just too enjoyable to let this story go. My second takeaway from this story is that the digital era has given rise to two unfortunate forms of entitlement. The first one is that nobody feels that they need to pay for anything anymore online. People say, I shouldn't have to pay for the music that I listen to. Isn't there some pirated form of this song that I can get a hold of? Why do I have to pay for this video I'm watching? In other words, the value of intellectual property has been degraded in the digital era because nobody wants to pay for anything anymore. The second form of entitlement relates to this case, in which nobody feels that anyone has any zone of privacy anymore. We expect in the reality TV era to know everything and be entitled to know everything about everybody's lives. After all the dust had settled and Professor McElroy had been reinstated in her position, she wrote an article about her experience in the Washington Post, in which she basically made 3 points. The first point was that she had been mortified when she found out about her mistake, not surprisingly. The second point was that she was not going to give any detailed explanation of how the accident occurred. And the third point was that basically this had really been much ado about nothing. This is a rather trivial occurrence that had become a major controversy. Well, the interesting thing about the reaction to her article was that people were very dissatisfied with the amount of information that she gave, or should I say the lack of information. People wanted to know, how did that mistake get made? How did that porn link get put in your email? Now, I admit I'm curious to know also how the porn link got in there. But I'm also reasonable enough to know that it's none of my business how it got in there. The professor's private life is really none of my business. She has a perfect right to lead her life as she sees fit. Furthermore, we have no idea whose link that was. Maybe it was her husband's. Are people expecting her to say, hey, that's not mine. That's my husband's favorite porn site. She also has 2 teenage kids. Who knows how that link got there? But she's not about to throw any family members under the bus, nor should she be telling us what her private viewing habits are. Now, I admit it's somewhat titillating to think about the good professor going home after a long day at work, pouring a glass of scotch and logging on to her favorite porn site, but that's really none of our business. Which leads to my third takeaway from this issue. Women watch porn. Whether you're going by Google Analytics, whether you're going by Nielsen net ratings, whether you're going by the most recent studies, basically about 1 of every 3 people who access porn online are female. And I expect that with every passing year, that number is going to get higher, which is consistent with women's increasing empowerment and realization that nothing is off limits to them. And from my point of view, that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. So call me crazy, but I look to a world where mistakes of this sort are an occasion for amusement and general merriment, rather than the faux outrage that we've seen around this case. But perhaps I'm just a naive idealist. I'm Jeff Rowan. Thanks for watching.